Hi there, this is Adam with the Coding Interface, and today I want to do a walkthrough of how you can use the AWS Serverless Application Model framework with the Java programming language to build a REST API that interacts with AWS S3 as a backend data store. Now, that's not necessarily your most typical backend data store for a REST API. More often than not, you're going to be leaning towards using some sort of either NoSQL or relational database, maybe Amazon's DynamoDB if you're comfortable with NoSQL and you like the benefits of that, or a relational database with RDS, something like Aurora Serverless, Postgres, MySQL, something along those lines. However, I promise you, there will be times in your career when S3 is the appropriate solution. And specifically, some of those situations where S3 is a most appropriate solution is when you need a low-cost storage solution for data that you don't access a whole heck of a lot or too frequently. You don't request it, you don't update it too frequently, and frequently is sort of a subjective term. In my mind, I'm going to say if you don't access it more than a few times a day, and it's just small amounts of data that you're accessing, like a file or two at a time, maybe a few files, and updating those, but maybe just a couple of times a day, then yeah, S3 might be a perfectly fine solution for you. It's very low cost, very scalable, and there's a ton of lifecycle hooks that you can use to transition S3 data sets amongst different storage access cost levels. So that's the focus of today: AWS Serverless, Java, and S3 data access or management. All right, so to get started, the very first thing that we need to make sure we have is we need to make sure that we have the AWS CLI and AWS SAM installed. And I'm not necessarily going to walk through how to do this, but I'm going to show you where you can go to find those things, right? So if I do a Google search here for AWS CLI install, then you can see right here, you get instructions for all of the major operating systems. So if you're on Mac like I am, there's great instructions for an installer. There should also be instructions for installing with something like Brew. And then there's MSI installers for folks on Windows, and Linux is going to have its own set of instructions as well. Similarly, we'll need to have the AWS SAM CLI. So if I Google for AWS SAM CLI or whatever is your favorite search engine, you're going to find similar instructions. So you're going to need both of those things. So again, it's going to show you instructions on all of the major operating systems. And then you'll need to go in, and part of this part of the instructions are going to be showing you how to set up your AWS credentials. So you're going to want something with fairly liberal resource policy rules so that you can create a number of different AWS resources using these credentials. What I generally say for folks to do when you're just developing and in a development environment is I say use an admin, right? So use an admin policy, but if not, it will tell you in here what the different levels of access you're going to need as far as what permissions you're going to need to use the AWS SAM CLI. So once you have those installed, I want to highlight one more thing. So that's AWS SAM reference. So the docs for the AWS SAM, which stands for, again, Serverless Application Model, are absolutely fantastic. So just Google AWS SAM docs or something like that, and you'll find the AWS documentation page here for it. Definitely worth having a look. I've been using SAM for some time now, very heavily, and I probably have this open every single day. and am looking something up, even though I've used it daily for at least the last year. So become friends with the docs. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start getting serious, right? So you'll have the SAM CLI installed, and you can verify what version you have of the AWS SAM CLI. So I have version 133. I think that's relatively new. Maybe it goes up to like 136 at the moment, but this is perfectly fine. And so the very first thing that you want to do when you get started with a new SAM project is you're going to want to use the SAM CLI to generate a boilerplate project based off of a cookie cutter template that AWS provides for you. So if I do a SAM help, you can see the various different subcommands that are available in here. And use the init command to start up a new project. So I will do SAM init, and then if I just leave everything off here, it will prompt me to go along with a series of choices. Now, that's great for the first few times that you use SAM. What I find myself doing more often than not is I use the various flags because I use them in automation scripts also, not just for the rapid application development, developer experience of the SAM CLI, but it's actually used very well and commonly for automation and CI/CD and that sort of thing. So I will do a SAM init, and then the name of my SAM project is going to be SAM Java REST API and S3. And then also runtime, I'm going to specify Java 11 as my runtime. And then for my dependency manager, I'm going to specify I want to use Maven for my project. And then there are various app templates to give you a sample project that is filled out and has like executable, runnable, deployable code in it to get you going quickly. I will start with the Hello World template, which is just a simple API gateway and Lambda based REST API. And then the packaging mechanism, so you can use containers or you can use zip deployment mechanism. I'm just going to go with the standard zip package type. So I'll write package type and zip. And so let me run that, and you can see it's cloning the cookie cutter template there from GitHub. And this will take just a moment. And now I have this new SAM Java REST API in here. So let me cd into SAM Java REST API, and you can see that I have a handful of files and a boilerplate Lambda function. So let me open this in my favorite Java IDE, which is IntelliJ. So I can now go to the open, and I will find where I saved this, which is in this temp directory right here. And that's the new directory that was created by the SAM CLI, right? So SAM Java REST API S3. I will open that guy up, and it opened up over here. I'm sorry, I'll pull it back into the right window. And then once that's open, I can come over here to my template, and I can start explaining what's going on inside of this SAM CloudFormation template. So like I said, it kind of scaffolds out a sample project to give me a good working example of how a Java-based serverless application will run or will look. And so the very first thing to call out is there is a serverless function resource. So this maps to an AWS Lambda function. And you can see that it specifies the code lives in this directory here called Hello World function. And the handler within there is in a package named Hello World. in a Java class named app and in a method inside that class called handle request. And that the runtime is Java 11, that's what we specified, and then it's going to pick the architecture that's necessary to run on Lambda, and then it gives you a default memory, which we can change, as well as a global timeout of 20 seconds, and it kind of shows you, hey, this is how you can work with environment variables. And then last but not least, it shows you that the event that will invoke this Lambda function is going to be a REST API. And the path to this REST API is going to be at /hello. And the HTTP method is a get method. So if I deploy this to my AWS cloud environment, which I'm going to go ahead and do here real quick, with do an ls, make sure I'm in the right directory. So I want to do this in the same directory as my template.yaml file. I can do a sam build in this directory, and that's going to build my source code, which lives, it's a Maven project, so it's going to live in source main Java and then the name of the package, followed by app. So here's my Lambda handler inside of the app class, which extends from the handler or request handler class, or actually implements the request handler interface, which is a generic that expects a request and returns a response. And so this thing just simply fetches the IP address of the individual. So I'm going to just say this is actually Adam's house. So I'm going to get rid of this line right here, and I'm going to update this to be Adam's house. And I don't need to do string interpolation at all. I will just make this a straight string. All right, and then I can hack out this method here because I'm not using it anymore. And this will just respond with hello world as the message, and then the location is Adam's house. All right, and it sets up some headers. We expect JSON, and we will return JSON. All right, so I did sam build down here, so now let me deploy this. So I'm going to do sam deploy -- guided, just like what it recommends here after the conclusion of my sam build command. However, I have various profiles here in my AWS setup, so I'm going to use a specific one, account A, and I'm going to deploy this to a very specific region of US East 2. All right, so let's do that. And very first thing it's going to do is ask me for the name of this thing. So I'm going to name it the same as my project, SAM Java REST API S3. And yes, I want to use USD2, confirm change sets before they deploy. No, I don't really need to confirm it. I do want it to make IAM roles for my Lambda functions and other resources, so I'll say the default there. And it might not be authorized. Yes, that's correct. I'm not using authentication at the moment. I'm not going to protect this REST API. Maybe we can do a follow-up video on how to do that. And then save arguments to a default config file. Yes, that's wonderful. Keeps me from having to type all this again. And then that's where it will save to the samconfig.toml file. And yes, default environment. So this is going to go ahead and deploy for me. And then after it deploys, the output section of my CloudFormation SAM template will spit out the API URL, and that's concocted from these components here. So we'll take just a moment here and let that deploy. All right, so that has successfully deployed now. And you can see that is the URL of my REST API. So if I pull in my browser once again, and I can make a GET request now with my browser, and we should see a JSON response back out of this thing. There we go. Message hello world and location. It looks like we still have the IP address coming through there, so that's interesting. I wonder how that happened. Okay. So I actually built that a little too late. So I built it and then made and then I built it, made the update, and then deployed. So the problem is the built version of the code actually lives here in this .aws-sam template. So I will just go ahead and blur that out in the video. But let me prove to you that I'm not crazy, and that does it does behave the way I expect it to. So I'll run a SAM build one more time. And if I were to be watching yep, no error is going to be thrown in this because I'm no longer making any sort of request. So that would be a checked exception, but there's no exception to be thrown. So let's try that one more time. I'll do build again. I don't have output. Here we go. Cut one too many things out. Let me clean up my indentation here a little bit. All right, perfect. So now this for sure will build. Positive about it. All right, and I can now just do deploy this time. So I did build, and now I can do deploy because all of those settings that I put in there previously got saved here to this SAM config toml file. So this should deploy quite a bit faster. And I love how I get the nice table formatted change set and progress of my updates here. So you can see that it's specifying what it's doing, which is just really, really neat to watch. Okay, so that's done. Let me recopy this, and I'll make yet another request over here in this thing in my browser. And all right, now we see the updated version. So message, hello world, location, Adam's house. All right, so that's just a quick whirlwind tour of the basic boilerplate sample app that the AWS SAM CLI creates for you. In the next set of videos, we're going to see how we can update this to provide a REST API for managing popular software engineering quotes and store data in S3 backend. All right, thanks for joining.